With a solid trilogy already lined up, Silent Hill 4: The Room changes things up quite a bit. The game follows yet another brand new protagonist, Henry Townsend, as he wakes up one morning to find himself unexpectedly trapped in his apartment room. This one came out in 2004, only 1 year after the release of Silent Hill 3. It also came out for the Xbox upon initial release instead of just the PlayStation 2. A lot of people consider the first 4 Silent Hill games to be the golden age of Silent Hill, while other people consider that only to be the first 3. Silent Hill fans are very divisive on this title. Some people love it, while other people hate it. With only a 1-year development cycle and a great change in the series formula, is Silent Hill 4 good or bad? Let's settle this debate once and for all. This is Silent Hill 4: The Room. Silent Hill 4 is probably the strongest introduction sequence yet. While Silent Hill 1 had original CG scenes, and Silent Hill 3 grabbed cutscenes, and Silent Hill 2 did both, Silent Hill 4 does not only both, but also incorporates snippets of gameplay. It really looks like this time, instead of giving you an idea of the story or whatever, they really just wanted to create something scary, and they did one hell of a job. The intro sequence is terrifying. Many clips are edited together in such a way that'll creep you right out. It's all very cool and is definitely my favorite intro sequence in the series. For once, I actually really like the title screen. While past games had a fairly generic title screen, Silent Hill 4 showcases the game's iconic image of the chained-up door keeping Henry in his apartment. The music that plays here is a very dead-sounding guitar piece that makes me a little on edge when I hear it. I like it. Silent Hill 4 is split up into 2 kinds of segments. Segments where you'll explore a level, like a building or whatever, but instead of exploring the town of Silent Hill between levels, you'll now explore Henry's apartment. The apartment segments take place in first person. You'll look around the room interacting with objects using the X button. From here, you can save your game, manage your inventory, and solve various puzzles. Just like Silent Hill 3, 4 also begins with a nightmare sequence. This time it takes place inside Henry's apartment. You'll get a hang of the controls and how the apartment segments feel during this bit. Henry then wakes up and gives a monologue that explains how he's been trapped in his apartment for quite some time now. Pretty soon, Henry then discovers a large hole in his bathroom wall. Seeing that it's the only way out, without hesitation, he then climbs through, but only to find himself in a warped version of reality. These segments control just like past Silent Hill games, but with many changed mechanics. First of all, the combat is very different than past Silent Hill games. Weapons are now limited to just guns and melee weapons. There's only 2 types of guns in the game, the pistol and the revolver. Yeah, that's right, there's no shotguns or rifles in this game, it's just handguns. The melee weapons all feel very similar too. Instead of being able to tap the button to swing the weapon and holding it down to slam the weapon on the enemy, you now hold the button down to charge up a meter. Letting go of the button when the meter is full will execute a very powerful swing. The combat in Silent Hill 4 is a lot easier to get a hang of, as hitting enemies without getting hit is a much easier task. The charge attack is also great at taking out multiple enemies at once. Here's a little tip. During the wind-up animation for the charged attack, Henry is invincible. That means if you charge up an attack, get near the enemy, and use the attack right when the enemy attacks you, Henry will not take damage, but rather will attack right through. This makes it very easy to get through many combat situations without getting hurt. The different melee weapons in this game don't really feel that different. It feels like they went back to the Silent Hill 1 formula of weapons, how the stronger ones are better at no real penalty. This feels like a step back from Silent Hill 3, which had a nice little system to keep the older weapons from being useless. In Silent Hill 4, when you get a new weapon, you'll likely never use the previous weapon ever again. Now, the weapons are still shorter just like Silent Hill 3, but the weapon length is now completely irrelevant because of the invincibility period during the wind-up animation. Especially because the wind-up animation of the small weapons are much longer and get Henry close enough to hit the enemy regardless of the weapon's length. Since it's so easy to take out enemies with melee weapons, I never found myself using the pistol just to be safe. You can also find golf clubs to use as melee weapons, and they're a lot stronger than the earlier weapons in the game, but they do break after limited use. You'll probably never bother using these after you get the baseball bat, because by then there's really not much point in using them. So to sum up the combat, it is technically a better combat system. It works better, it flows better, it feels better. But because of that, you no longer really get that sense of dread from encountering each battle anymore. And that's a crying shame, because that's something Silent Hill always did really well. Taking damage doesn't even really seem to matter too much, because your health will automatically heal whenever you're in your apartment room. and you'll find yourself going back there to save or solve puzzles frequently enough for low health to never become a problem. The puzzles in Silent Hill 4 are some of the best yet. Usually the puzzles are just a riddle you have to interpret, but Silent Hill 4 The Room really makes you think outside the box. Having access to a totally different plane of reality with a completely different style of gameplay really helps broaden your way of thinking. Here's an example. In the forest world, there's a character named Jasper who agrees to help you, given you find him something chocolatey to drink. Where the hell am I gonna find something like that in the woods? I don't have access to a fridge or anything. Oh, right. See what I mean now? You'll also use your apartment to view the world from a different angle. For instance, a puzzle may require you to see something outdoors that you have no way of seeing in the level, but you are able to see from your apartment window. You'll access the apartment via many holes spread out through each stage. These holes are about as frequent as save points were in past games, as you now need to enter the hole to save. With the ability to heal for free in the apartment room, the game compensates for that by making healing items very scarce. You only need healing items in the moment of battle when you get low on health. You're also now unable to pause the game to use items, as the inventory is now in real time. Henry is also only capable of carrying 10 items at once. This means if you want to pick up that ammo pack but your inventory is full, well, too bad. You'll find yourself running back to the room quite often to arrange your inventory via the chest in your living room. You can store as many items as you want in the chest, so whenever your inventory gets full, you can always drop stuff off to use later. I'm really not a big fan of the whole limited inventory space thing. It just really breaks the pace of the game for me. Having to run all the way back to the room just to dump all your stuff off whenever it gets full, it's just really cumbersome. I'm also not a big fan of selecting items in real time. Sure, it makes the pace of the game flow a little better, but not being able to pause the game and heal in the middle of battle calls for taking some unnecessary damage when simply trying to use an item. I guess they did this to try and build tension when healing in the midst of a battle when there's tons of enemies around, but it fails flat at creating fear and only creates frustration. With the easier combat, it doesn't really look like Silent Hill 4 manages to be that scary. I mean, that's the reason Silent Hill was so scary in the first place, anticipating battles you didn't know whether or not you could survive. But not to worry, because Silent Hill 4 finds other ways of being scary. Silent Hill 4 more than makes up for it with the creepiest enemy design yet. Perhaps the most infamous are the twin victims, the physical embodiment of a murdered pair of twins. They look like two baby heads on top of a mound of flesh with two giant arms it uses to walk and run. When you first see these things, they're frozen in place like a statue pointing right at you. The second you lay eyes on these things for the first time, you'll probably freeze in place too. There's also a brand new type of enemy called the ghosts. Oh god, don't even get me started on them. These things are horrifying. The way they move alone is enough to make me shit my pants. They look like they're being dragged across the air towards you on puppet strings. These things will chase you to no end. Even if you leave the screen, they still come after you. And if it wasn't enough for them just to use the door like you did, no. They have to crawl through the wall in a bloody heaping mess until they're through. You need to steer clear of these things because they can do some serious damage. Hell, just getting close to them is enough to give Henry a headache, making him lose health. Not only that, but no matter how hard you try, you cannot kill them. They're ghosts after all, they're already dead. You can't kill what's dead. You are able to immobilize them with a rare item called the Sword of Obedience. Using this item, you can pin the ghost down, rendering it completely harmless. There's hardly any of these in the game, however, so it's not recommended you use them all willy-nilly. Luckily, you are able to pull the sword back out of the ghost whenever you want, so as long as you haven't left the level yet, you can just pull it back out whenever you'd like. Beware though, because doing this will free the ghost. Because of this, you can pin down a ghost, explore the area unharmed, then pull it back out and get the hell out of there. I really like this. It adds a brand new layer of decision-making horror to the formula. And let's be real here, with the easier combat, Silent Hill 4 really needed that. You may no longer get a sense of dread from the regular enemies, but dear God will you ever when you hear the moaning of a ghost. And yeah, you heard me right. You no longer rely on the radio to know when monsters are nearby. You'll instead hear the monster itself, as the radio is completely absent from Silent Hill 4. This is one of the many weird decisions they made when making this game. Another good example is the total removal of the flashlight. I can kinda understand that one, since they're no longer communicating fear using those mechanics, but instead with new ones that came up for this game. But one thing they removed that really pisses me off is the separate puzzle difficulties. While Silent Hill 2 and 3 had separate difficulties for puzzle and combat, which was really cool, Silent Hill 4 only has a single difficulty that you will choose from easy, normal, or hard. What makes this so outrageous is that on the harder difficulties, not only is the combat harder, but the puzzles are different too. So why the hell didn't they make separate difficulties this time? There's no reason for it. Another thing they removed that I do not understand whatsoever is the traditional tank controls. Silent Hill has always utilized tank controls to make player control a much more feasible task because of the rapidly swinging and changing camera angles. Now, you could opt out for a 2D control type in 2 and 3, but it's not likely that you'd use it since the game was built around a tank control style. Silent Hill 4, with the lack of this setup, still has all of the changing and twisting camera angles, and that can make control downright difficult at times. So why would they only have these controls available if the game was still made with tank controls in mind? It just boggles my mind. It doesn't break the game or anything, but it calls for a lot of brief moments where control is slightly awkward. Okay, that's enough rambling about the controls. Let's take a look at the journey through the game. After crawling through the hole in his bathroom, Henry finds himself in a subway station. It's not long before he runs into Cynthia, a woman convinced that this is all just a dream.
This is my dream, and you don't even know my name.
I should probably mention about now that the voice acting is actually not half bad. All of the characters sound fairly convincing.
Shut himself up in his room and wouldn't come out?
That is, all of the characters except Henry. Henry's voice sounds fitting, but it doesn't really sound like the voice actor put enough oomph into the lines. He enunciates the syllables correctly, so it doesn't just sound like he's reading the lines off a page, but he definitely needs a little more enthusiasm. It almost sounds like he's whispering most of his lines.
Yeah, my name's Henry.
Come on, man, just speak up. Cynthia asks Henry to protect her from the monsters. He doesn't really do a good job of that because Cynthia ends up being murdered by an unknown assailant. Henry then wakes up in his bed, unsure if it was all just a dream or not. Looking out his window, he can see ambulances surrounding the subway station. You can probably put 2 and 2 together here. Anyone who dies in the other world dies in real life too. There's a lot of really cool details you can see from looking at your apartment. Being someone trapped in an apartment room, it's not long before you start looking out everywhere you can. The windows, the peephole in the door, even the crack in the wall letting you peer into your neighbor's apartment. The first thing you'll probably notice is that there's 15 bloody handprints on the wall outside your door. It also seems like you're the only one who can see them, as no one else heeds them any attention. You'll witness the other people in the building go about their daily lives, and it all helps contribute to the story being told. Like your neighbor Eileen Galvin, who's cleaning up before going out to a party, or the superintendent Frank, who's wondering why the hell you haven't come out of your apartment in so long.
This is the superintendent. Are you in there, Henry?
Here's a fun fact. Frank's last name is Sunderland, and he is the father of James Sunderland. He's also the only one who knows just exactly what happened in your apartment room all of those years back.
Anyway, it's not the first time.
If you looked outside the apartment window before entering the subway level, you can actually see Cynthia walk down in there. Silent Hill 4 is chock full of neat things like this. Silent Hill 4 The Room has 6 levels. The subway, Silent Hill Forest, the water prison, the buildings area, the apartment building, and, of course, the hospital. In every level you visit, you'll fail to save someone from being murdered. Each time someone is murdered, you'll notice another bloody handprint on the wall outside your apartment. It turns out that a cultist named Walter Sullivan is murdering people as part of a ritual called the 21 Sacraments. The purpose of this ritual is something that I'll keep a secret because it's so cool to figure it all out as you play the game that there's no way in hell that I'm gonna spoil it. Until about halfway through the game, Walter always remains this faceless, mysterious person who you never quite get to see.
Kill me. Walter's gonna kill me. He's gonna kill me.
In fact, the first time you talk to him, you don't even know it's him, and I find that so cool.
She was younger than me back then.
I like that the story isn't just outright told to you, you kinda have to figure it all out yourself. You gradually uncover the mystery as you find and read notes and journal entries that you'll find scattered throughout the game.
Yeah, that Walter Sullivan case. But Sullivan's dead. They even got the body.
They're all really easy to find, so unlike most modern horror games, you won't be searching every goddamn drawer in the game just to find the story. So if you're like me and you hate that kind of shit in games, don't worry, because you'll find none of that here. I really like the story in this game. For the first time ever in a horror game, I really felt like a detective, piecing every little bit together in order to find the bigger picture. Trust me when I say this, Silent Hill 4 has the best story so far. I would even go as far to say as it's better than 2's. Again, not as clever as 2's, but as a whole, I find it to be a much more interesting and exciting story.
Do you know something about what's going on? Hey, you! Stop!
It turns out that the next victim in the 21 Sacraments is none other than Eileen Galvin, the neighbor that you've been keeping an eye on the entire game. Unlike previous victims, Henry actually succeeds in saving her. This is where we enter the second half of the game, and Silent Hill 4 takes a massive turn at this point. You'll reunite with Eileen in the hospital. Knowing that she needs to get out of the otherworld ASAP to escape being murdered by Walter, Henry tries to bring Eileen back to the normal world via a hole. It turns out that Henry is the only one who can see and use the holes, meaning that you'll have to guide Eileen all the way back to the twisted otherworld to safety.
Have you been here the whole time?
Yeah? And I didn't see any hole either. You just disappeared all of a sudden.
I know what you're thinking, and the answer is yes. The second half of the game is an escort mission. Not to worry though, because it's probably the least frustrating escort mission that I've ever played. Firstly, unlike Maria in Silent Hill 2, Eileen cannot die in battle. In fact, she cannot die, period. Taking more damage will cause her to become more possessed though, but I'll get more into that later. You can also equip Eileen with a weapon so she can assist you in combat. She's actually really helpful, like look at this, she's wrecking those monsters. Unfortunately, Eileen's weapon will take up a space in your inventory. You'll navigate back through the past 5 levels all over again, this time accessing different rooms and solving different puzzles. You'll also encounter 4 new type ghosts, and let me tell you, these things are nasty. Each of the new ghosts are the ghost of the 4 murder victims that you failed to save. Cynthia, Jasper, Andrew, and Richard. These ghosts are more powerful than ever, and they'll follow you not just throughout the entire level, but the entire game. If you pin them down and leave them that way, you won't see them throughout the rest of the entire game, so I recommend you use the Swords of Obedience on these 4 ghosts. One of my favorite details in this game is that every ghost's appearance reflects how the victim died. Jasper being the most obvious as he's on fire because he burned to death. My favorite though is Richard because he vibrates and stutters in a terrifying way because he was electrocuted to death. Again, it's these 4 ghosts that I highly recommend, if anything, that you use those Swords of Obedience on. Knocking them down to give you a chance to pin them down with a sword is a lot more harder though, because these ghosts can take a lot more abuse. Luckily, there's another rare item you can find called the Silver Bullet, which you can load into your pistol, fire off at one of the ghosts, and knock them out instantly so you can pin them down, and then you won't have to ever worry about encountering them again. The silver bullets are even more scarce than the swords are. While there are 5 swords in the game, there's only 3 silver bullets, and there's no guarantee that you'll even find them all. When you fire one of these, you need to make sure that you make every shot count, because you only have 3 bullets. Another cool bit you might notice at this point in the game is that the other ghosts that have already been chasing you throughout the first half of the game are also murder victims that have been killed by Walter Sullivan. You will encounter 6 of the first 15 murder victims. Adding the following 4 gives you 10 ghosts out of the 21 sacraments. Again, details like this are exceptionally cool, and it's one thing that Silent Hill 4 does a lot better than past Silent Hill games. You can play the entire game without even learning this. It's the little things that Silent Hill 4 does really, really well. Not only will you be chased by these new ghosts, but Walter himself will come after you, as you have gotten in his way of finishing the 21 Sacraments. Like the ghosts, Walter will not die. You can attack him all you want. He will fall down and be stunned for a short time, but it's really best just to run. Unlike the ghosts, you cannot pin him down with a sword, so when you hear that laugh, you better start sprinting to the nearest exit. The second half of Silent Hill 4 is a panic-driven roller coaster ride and a constant, desperate attempt to escape Walter and the ghost of his victims. In this half of the game, you can also no longer heal in your apartment, and the reason for this is because after saving Eileen, your apartment becomes haunted. Prepare for some damn good scares, my friends, because the hauntings in Apartment Room 302 call for some of the scariest moments in Silent Hill history. There's a number of crazy things that can happen in here. Ghost children in your closet, a dead mutilated cat in your fridge, and even the ghosts just straight up trying to crawl their way through the wall. What makes these so scary is that you've gotten so used to this room, this safe haven, being the way it is. So when you start to subtly change things that you've become so familiar with, you might not even notice it until you're so close that it freaks you out when you see it. Let me tell you about one of my favorite hauntings in the entire game. Every time you go back to the apartment room, you always wake up facing this painting, and you have to walk by that painting every time you go to the living room. So it's not even something you consider, it's not even something that crosses your mind at all, you just see it every time you go back. One of the hauntings changes the image on that painting, and I didn't even notice it until it was really close to it. It scared the shit out of me. I would show it to you, but unfortunately on the playthrough I recorded for this video, I didn't encounter it. And that's the thing. Every single playthrough, all of the hauntings are totally randomized, so you never know what ones you're gonna get. And you have to get rid of these things, because if you go near them, you'll start taking damage. This makes it very difficult to navigate your apartment to save and manage your inventory without losing health, and you cannot afford to lose health because you can no longer heal here. There's two items you can use to go about removing the hauntings in your apartment: the holy candles and saint medallions. You'll start finding these after the halfway point of the game. You can use the holy candle by simply placing it on the ground in front of the haunting. One candle will get rid of one haunting. The saint medallions are a little more durable, as you can get rid of about 2.5 hauntings with just one. These ones work a little differently. You'll have to equip it and then walk near the haunting and simply wait for it to go away. To compensate for not being able to heal in your apartment anymore, the game is now a tad more forgiving with the health items, so you'll find a lot more of them out there now. I'm really glad they waited until this point in the game before they started giving you a lot of healing items, because if they didn't, you would have had a large stockpile of them by now, and being a survival horror game, it kinda would have defeated the point. After guiding Eileen back through the other world, her and Henry discover Walter's weakness. It's here where you fight the final and only boss, Walter Sullivan. When I did the Silent Hill 1 video, I thought it would be really weird if the final boss was the only boss, but it really doesn't feel that way in 4, so I guess it's their way of learning from 1 that bosses for the sake of just having bosses doesn't really help the game as a whole. During this fight, a possessed Eileen is slowly walking towards her death, and you'll have to defeat Walter in time to save her. Like Silent Hill 1, there are 4 possible endings: a very bad ending, a bad ending, good ending, and a very good ending. Again, it is a matter of just 2 things. The first is whether or not you got rid of 80% of the hauntings in your room, and the other is whether or not Eileen died in the final battle. The speed at which Eileen walks is based on how possessed she is when you enter the final fight, so to assure the best ending, you'll have to avoid letting her take damage. This is a pretty annoying task, so luckily, they actually made an alternate method of doing this. Remember those holy candles? Well, you can use one holy candle to remove all possession from Eileen, so right before you trigger that final cutscene where you're able to do this, put down a holy candle and watch those ghosts go bye-bye. Thanks to this, it's actually pretty easy to assure that you get the best ending, so thanks for putting that in, Team Silent. Beating the game will unlock a new fear file, just like previous Silent Hill games, but I personally find that 4 doesn't really have as much replay value as past Silent Hill games. It's got a fantastic story, but I probably won't come back to experience it all for a while. So I guess this is normally when I hold up the game and I say, so in the end, is Silent Hill 4 a good game? But I can't really say for sure. Whether or not the game is good or bad isn't such a concrete answer this time. They made a lot of really weird decisions when they were making this game, removing the radio, the flashlight, removing the puzzle difficulties, removing the tank controls. But then again, it's got a fantastic story, and it just might be the scariest game in the series. Not to mention some ridiculously clever puzzles. It breaks away from the same old Silent Hill formula just at the right time in the series. It takes risks and tries something new, and it's a shame that so many people hate it just because of that. Yes, Silent Hill 4 does a handful of things wrong, but despite that, there is so much brilliance here that you should not let its shortcomings ruin the whole experience for you. I personally love the game. I had such a blast playing it, but that's not going to stop me from giving criticism where criticism is due. So here's my final verdict. If you're a Silent Hill fan who hasn't played this game just because you heard it was the worst one in the series, give it a shot. Just go into it knowing that it will be different. Very different. All I recommend is that you approach this one with caution. Well, I guess that's it for the Silent Hill Marathon. We've covered the first 4 Silent Hill games, all developed by the original team, Team Silent. Now, I do know there's still ground to cover. There's still these games. Ugh. But I think for this year I'm all Silent Hilled out, so maybe next Halloween. You might just be surprised by what I have to say about them, so until next time, thanks for watching, take care, and have yourselves a happy Halloween. Hello and welcome once again to the credits card. If you missed the first 3 videos I made on the first 3 Silent Hill games and you want to watch those right now, you can click whichever one you want to watch right here on the screen. For those wondering why this video was 1 week late, that's because I finished the episode and then the hard drive on my laptop died and I lost absolutely everything. So I spent the past 5 solid days with 0 distractions recreating this entire episode from scratch. It ended up being a little more short than it was originally, but I think that's because I was a little more straight to the point and I cut out a lot of the excess fat that I could have got rid of. So recreating this thing was a nightmare. I had to replay the game, I had to rewrite the script, I had to record everything all over again. But you know, that's what you do when this happens. You gotta push the problems out of the way. Another thing is, this video was a lot longer than most Nitro Rad episodes, so I just want to ask you guys, are you cool with longer videos? Will you watch the whole thing, or would you rather I keep it just to 15 minutes or less? I just want to know, just for future reference, you know, if you guys rather shorter videos, I'd rather make shorter videos, you know. So, guess that's it. Have yourselves a happy Halloween, and see you next time.